Hello and welcome to the SportsGrad podcast. My name is Ryan Walker, and with me, as always, is the excited Ruben Williams. How are you, mate?
G'day, Ryan. I'm doing fantastic. Thank you. Always a pleasure to chat with you. Those who watch us on YouTube, they'll be able to see this, but I just want to draw attention because your backdrop has changed. There's something hanging over your shoulder right now. What have you got behind you?
That is my habit tracker. One thing that you have taught me over the last few months is to, look after your habits and get some routines in place. So I've got a few things up there. I won't read them out loud, but you know, it's quite good. So that keeps me accountable. I believe you've got the same thing to the right of your or the right side of you right now.
Yeah, it's a bit off camera, but I'm looking up on it on the
Mm,
wall now. It's sitting up there. There's a couple of gaps, but it's in a much better
yeah,
position than it has been in recent months. So,
that's
how's yours
my
looking?
yeah, it's looking pretty good. Sorry, better talking to the microphone. It's looking pretty good. Couple of gaps, but nothing uh too bad. I think if there was to be gaps anywhere, that'd be where they are right now. So I'm happy with that. But a good start to my habit tracking thus far. Let's get cracking. We could talk about habit tracking all day because we do love our self development and what is it, personal development books, all those kinds of things. So we better move on. But before we do, a quick message from our good friends at Deakin, where every single course is backed by industry experts, so you can be confident you'll get the job you want with a degree employers want. Deakin University, progressive real world learning.
Ryan, the show is also brought to you by our good friends at Sports Where I Am. Give yourself a memorable summer to look forward to and head to sportswhereiam.com to find all your favourite sports. Plus, you can use the code SportsGrad and grab 5% off your tickets. There's the Adelaide Test match coming up very soon. We'll be heading to that. Plenty more on offer right around the world too. So head to the website and check out all the great offers.
Brilliantly read, Ruben. If you want to learn more about who we are or want to ask us any questions, feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn. You can find a link to do so in the show notes. Rightio, let's get into it. Rubes, who have we got on today?
Ryan, today we're chatting with Anna Livingston, who is the Chief Diversity and People Officer at Tennis Australia. She's got a background in HR, but now she sits across the management of people and recruitment at TA, as well as all the initiatives that go on to make Tennis Australia an inclusive workspace. Now, Ryan, she's coming in at the best time because Dylan Alcott is the GOAT of just about any sport. But then you throw him into, disability sport as well. He's like the all-time greatest person in that space. He's just recently won the Golden Slam. He's an outstanding ambassador for people with a disability participating in sport. And Anna has the absolute joy of working in the sport and using Dylan as an advocate to promote diversity and inclusion. So awesome episode to hear from Anna and one of the leading organisations for people with a disability and making workplaces more inclusive.
Absolutely. And a special shout out to Dylan. He'd be listening. So hello to you, mate. But so what are some things that stood out for you?
Well, Ryan, what I really loved was Anna gave us a few details on the questions that people can ask of an employer to make sure that the workplace is fit for them. Now, not every organization is going to have things set up so that people with a disability can walk straight in. So it's important that people can test them and ask the right questions. And Anna was able to provide a few of those questions that can help you, bring into an interview to make sure the organization is right for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I loved how she went through all the things that Tennis Australia are doing to create an inclusive organisation. And when you list them out, you think, wow, like that's a lot of activities, all sorts of things to make sure that, everyone's thinking about this and it's becoming normal. So I think that's one of the great things she said. So she lists out a few things that, I didn't know about, but wow, like it's pretty awesome that they're doing them. So tune in for that. That was awesome to hear.
Mm. And then finally, for people who want to work in this space, who want to aspire to reach Anna's role, she talked about some of the things that you can do right now that are very easily attainable to grab experience in that space. The things that were important to her were very immersive. She threw herself straight in. She talked about some ones that people can get involved in too to increase their understanding of the space and just make it normal.
Amazing, mate. Well, grab a pen, enjoy this chat with Anna Livingston. Anna, welcome to the SportsGrad podcast.
Hi, Ryan. Hi, Ruben. Great to be here.
Anna, it's awesome to have you on. And I'd imagine it's a pretty good time to be working in diversity and inclusion when you've got someone like Dylan Alcott, who is the star of this space, and you're working with Tennis Australia. What's it like having him involved?
Oh, it's amazing. It's awesome. It's exactly what any kind of business leader wants with respect to a champion that you can be proud of. He's an incredible advocate for people with disability. He is just a legend. He's hilarious. He's a lovely person. He's very giving. He's very engaged. So with the sport of tennis, but also our business and helping our workforce to become more inclusive. He's just an unbelievable role model, and honestly, like the perfect timing for my role and him. And it's really good. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, tell us a bit about your role. What does the Chief of Diversity and People Officer include?
Oh, look, it's one of those kind of wanky titles, but look, basically at the end of the day, I just look after the people side of the business. So at tennis, we have quite a diverse in the sense of it's a broad workforce. So we cover what we call our year-round workforce, so the people that are largely responsible with getting more Australians to have a racket in their hand and play the sport. And then, of course, we deliver the Summer of Tennis major events, of which the Australian Open is probably the most well-known. And so we have about 600 permanent staff, and then we recruit up to sort of 3,000 to 4,000 casual and volunteers over the sort of summer period. So, my role oversees that group. And then with respect to sort of inclusion and diversity, it's really just about having that executive sponsor to champion that we want our sport to reflect the communities that we live in, which is incredibly diverse, and that we need to be a sport and a workforce and deliver events that's welcoming and safe for everyone.
Love it. How did you get into this space? Where did it all start? Did you always want to work in diversity and inclusion, or how did it come about?
Oh, no. Well, I mean, I would open by saying I am just an enthusiastic amateur. I haven't studied in this space. I'm not by any stretch qualified. There are people far smarter than I. But I think for me, it probably connects back to my upbringing. So I'm one of 4 children, and my mum and dad both ran small businesses. But my mum had a gift shop in just suburban Melbourne. And so us kids just grew up in the shop, and we were all hands on deck. And so because of that environment, we would get all different people that would come into the shop. But not only were we exposed to quite a diverse, I suppose, customer base, but we were just taught from such a young age to be there to help, be there to serve, treat everyone equally. And so I think that's maybe where I have a real passion and burn to ensure that everyone is given equal opportunity. And then, it's just sort of manifested into the role I'm in today. I spent some time living and working in the Middle East for a really international and culturally different organisation. So that really opened my eyes to other ways of living and working, and though then just the similarities as well. We're all just people at the end of the day. So I don't know. I've just fallen into it, but I love it, and I'm really, enthusiastic, I suppose, but not qualified.
What were some of the roles that you had leading up to this one at Tennis Australia?
Well, my background has been in kind of traditional HR and industrial relations. So that had been sort of my stomping ground. And what I had found with the organisations and roles I'd had pre-Tennis Australia were they had become, not really deliberately, but I was just working with really diverse working groups. So whether that was, in manufacturing with a broad demographic of cultures and sort of economic groups within the workforce there, and then, as I mentioned, within other parts of the world, and then, of course, just with tennis now having exposure to sort of all of those marginalised segments has been, just an absolute honour, honestly. And as I said, it's sort of conveniently the moons have aligned, because having the likes of Dylan at tennis, while I happen to be at tennis, is like so cool. It's really amazing. Yeah.
Awesome. It must be a fun place to work. I know when we talk to a lot of people, they talk about how one of the most important parts of their job is having empathy for their audience or the people who their function tries to serve. With respect to like diversity and inclusion, what has been, I know, what experience or otherwise has been most significant to you in helping you empathize with the people that you aim to serve?
I think for me, so we have a few team members at tennis at the moment who have disabilities, and they're incredible. They're just daily inspiration, and working closely with them just opens your mind and eyes to a day in the life of. So I would encourage, and it's not that I've done heaps of it, but I just think I really believe that immersive learning and being around and just seeing the challenges that can be faced, but then also seeking to form relationships and understand the person, because that's the other thing that's been so clear to me, is that we're all just people. It doesn't matter ability, background, the color of our skin, gender, anything. It's just people. And I think the more we can have that first and anything else second is so important, really.
Do you think Tennis Australia do this really well? Obviously we want to make every workplace as inclusive as we possibly can. Do you think Tennis Australia have made really good strides to make it one of the great places to work? If you do have a disability, if you don't have a disability, it doesn't matter. It seems like it's a great place to work.
Oh, look, I'm biased, of course, but yeah, look, it definitely, every business I think is on a growth of, we talk about this journey of maturity, and, you never really reach that end point. I think it's just a constant need to educate and have internal awareness of the need to be inclusive. I would say tennis, we're amazing, and I think have a lot of the best intentions. Are we there yet? Probably not. There's lots more we could do, and tennis, even, like tennis as a sport is probably perceived as a bit of that sort of middle to upper class Anglo, the Pims and cucumber sandwiches. So it's sort of got that, it hasn't necessarily got the most inclusive brand within the community, but it's an amazingly accessible sport to play. Sort of both genders, all ages, and all abilities. So there's a sort of a natural platform for inclusivity at tennis. And I think what has happened really in the last probably, 8 to 10 years has been just leveraging that asset and really bringing to life and trying to showcase and show that we are an inclusive sport, that we can be enjoyed by all. But, and even again, from a workforce perspective, we're still working on that, and we've got a lot of activities and proactive activities to try and diversify our workforce and create that more inclusive culture. So it's a journey. We're not bad.
You mentioned some of your colleagues, and you just touched on some of the things that TA is trying to do to make it more inclusive. I was wondering, with reference to that, what sort of opportunities are there for people with a disability to work in sport?
Well, it's funny. I give this question some thought because I would come at it more from the case of there's really like any job is open to anyone. If you've got the skills and abilities in the sort of intellectual sense to be able to perform the tasks, I don't see there being a barrier for anyone based on sort of ability, physical ability, or background. So all opportunities are available to people with a disability at tennis. I think, though, the key for me for people with disability looking for employment is to really hone in on identifying organisations that are investing in this area, because they are the sorts of environments that will be really open-minded, and not only open-minded, but probably, they will grab talent like this because it's recognised as a benefit. In fact, it's not just another candidate applying. This is a candidate that's better than others because they bring to the workplace a different perspective, a different opinion, a different lived experience, and that's an asset. Particularly, and we know the theory around how diversity can drive better performance and business decisions. So look for organisations that get that, and I think they will be the opportunity. That will be where the opportunities lie, and really the job type will be whatever you're interested in.
This might be an inappropriate question, I'm not too sure, but where do you kind of like draw the line for someone with a disability to where they can fit the role and when they can't? Yeah,
it's a hard one. Again, I would say I'll just talk from my perspective, because I think every employer and, frankly, hiring manager or HR team will look at it differently. We've got quite a broad spectrum. So we've got individuals that we're working on a program at the moment that will have people with Down syndrome employed into the business in certain positions. And then we've got people who've just got some physical ability concerns that they need some slight adjustments with. I think from my mind, it's really find the right candidate, understand what they need to make them successful, and do what you can to support that. And that may be the right candidate happens to be in a wheelchair, which means you have to make sure that there's accessible wheelchair, routes to the office or whatever that may be, the facilities. Or it could be that they may need an interpreter, or I don't know, just whatever it is they may need, but understand the person and what those requirements are. And look, the honest truth is, if people want to find reasons to not support someone, they will. But it's those businesses that that see it as an asset, as something that it's not just the right thing to do, it's the thing to do. They'll move heaven and earth.
Yeah. So I remember hearing the story about a blind man who was working in like some sort of sales organization. He was in a sales role, and because he was blind, his hearing was extremely heightened. Like, he was a very good listener, and just through listening to the people he was trying to sell to, he smashed every single other person in his sales team because he was able to actually understand what they were looking for. And that just kind of pointed out to me that, there are those advantages for people who do live with a disability, because you've, in some cases, got these superhuman abilities that have just been heightened.
Exactly right.
But what are some of the other things that organisations can do to accommodate for people with a disability?
Well, I can talk to the team member in my team. So she is hard of hearing and she's unbelievable. She lip reads incredibly well. But what we did for her is put in place interpretive services. So with meetings or functions that were over a certain group, we'd provide her, she has access to an interpreter. We also make sure, like, it's widely communicated. She's very open about talking how she best communicates. we have, and I'm going to do a poor job at listing all the things, but so I suppose there's that internal awareness. We have audio support through the computer and also a phone, a special phone that allows her to hear and understand what's being said. And actually what's been fascinating is through COVID and us all working virtually, in some respects it's been easier for her, because one of her biggest difficulties in the workplace in a meeting room was you would sit, alongside people and opposite, and some there. And unless she can kind of eyeball you, it's quite hard for her to lip read. So meeting room environments were quite difficult, whereas at least on this platform we can see each other's faces really clearly and easily. So that's been sort of a unexpected benefit. But of course, people wearing masks in the street make that incredibly difficult for her to communicate. And in fact, for upcoming in December for International Day of People with a Disability, we're running an immersive program where we'll encourage team members to put themselves, kind of tricky, you've got to go on, you turn your volume down, turn on auto captions and do a meeting just reading auto cue. It is so hard. And that's her meeting, every meeting at work. And equally, to your point earlier about that person who was blind, to do a meeting wearing a blindfold and just experience what that's like for something that we might take for granted day in, day out. But I think the big thing for this person has just been, she's been with us now for nearly 5 years. So I think over that time, we have a relationship whereby she would just say, look, Anna, can I get some help with this or that? And it's like, of course, let's just make it happen. So it's probably, again, knowing the person, and they will help you to know how you can help them.
That's awesome. It's a silver lining of COVID, hey?
I know.
It's kind of made it easy in a way, which is great.
Yeah.
How have you seen sort of attitudes and policies change to improve opportunities for people with a disability?
I think we're kind of in the moment now. Actually, again, I'm biased, but I think Dylan's a major reason for that. I think we're starting to see people in a public forum now who may have physical disability or noticeable disabilities that is shining a light on abilities. I think the other piece for me, which is really big, is around certainly that sort of business leadership speak and the theory of leading performance, is that criticality for diversity and an environment that's safe and welcome for people to share views. And so that culture of safety by nature then allows for diversity, because when you've got a group of people who are open-minded, who are happy to hear another point of view, who are happy to hear from someone who might be different from them, they're by nature probably going to be a more welcoming team or environment to welcome someone who may have a disability or something different to them. So, and that's a lot of light is being shared on that at a leadership sort of almost training, or the fads of leadership at the moment. So I think it's a lot of momentum shifting in this way. And I know when we spoke in the lead up to today, I said I actually see people with disability who have skills to offer a business as a step ahead of others that may not, because I just see a really increasing trend with organisations that are seeking diversity, like they're actively looking for it rather than maybe competing with that greater pool of talent. It's a good time.
So if someone's got a disability and they're in a job interview, they want to work in sport, what sort of questions should they be asking of their future or potential employer to make sure the organisation is fit for them? Because you mentioned that some are more progressive than others. So how do you kind of test the waters with them in the interview room to make sure that the organisation is, doing what they should?
You're asking all the questions around culture, like try and get a feel for what it's like day in and day out in that business, like what life is like for people. So, talk to me about, do you do stuff as a working group? Like, do you get together? Do you have engagement activities? What's the calendar of learning, of education that might be in place?
Learning around disability or just anything?
I would just leave it open, because the answers to all of these things will be telling. If the answers to their learning calendar is, well, we have like a whole culturally immersive learning experience, well, that's a good sign. If it's nowhere to be seen, interesting. You're basically going to want to look for evidence that this business has taken steps to become more inclusive, and that they have driven that as a value or an expected behavior of their workforce. Because I don't necessarily think it's not always, well, have you got somebody with a disability that's already working here or have worked here in the past? Because that may not necessarily be the best guide as to the quality of that experience. They may have, and they could have treated the person like crap and it was horrible. And, it's really about actually the broader workforce and how they position inclusivity and celebrating diversity, and they're the businesses you want to go for. So be asking questions around those sorts of things. And the good ones will be leading with it. The good ones will have it in the job ad in the first place. Like, we are an employer of choice because we care about this, because we invest in it, we celebrate diversity, etc. But I suppose the other side is, they'll all say that, won't they? We all say it, but those that really mean it. So it's hard. It would be hard in that interview. You wouldn't want to kind of ask too many questions. They might be put off. But yeah, I'd be going to culture. You want to know what the culture of the organisation is as a good guide.
Is it worth testing with them? What lengths are they willing to go to accommodate your working arrangement?
Yeah, I suppose it's also up to that candidate or that individual how comfortable they feel. But I think the sooner you can be quite transparent and open, and again, normalize the conversation. So I am the right candidate for this role, and here are the reasons why. Also, what I bring to this organisation is a level of different perspective because I have a disability. In order to do my role, these are some things that would help me to be able to, perform to the best of my ability, or frame it to that way where it's not a liability. It's not like an annoyance or something they have to do on the side. No, this is actually part of the package of a great, talented candidate.
Love how you frame that. It seems just quite logical and simple. Like, why wouldn't you ask that question? So that's great. You mentioned just then a lot of organisations kind of just say it. We are an employer of choice because we support people from all walks of life, whatever it might be. But what is Tennis Australia doing specifically to make their workplace more inclusive for people with a disability?
I think if I were pulling all of the things together, it's just normalizing it. It's just creating I know I bang on a lot about culture and that culture of inclusivity, but to me, that's really the heart. If you've got people that are open-minded and open to difference, in whatever shape and form that comes, then it's going to be a great workplace for everyone, including people with a disability. So all of our efforts are focused on that. It's just about trying to open people's minds, have them, stay in the life of, try a meeting in this, as an immersive experience, come and watch wheelchair tennis, get in a wheelchair and try and play tennis. Like, little things like that are so eye-opening, and they tend to, my belief is that storytelling and the lived experience or that lived learning is so connecting. People remember that. It'll stick with them because the story was interesting or impactful for some reason. And, go and try and just do one of these small tasks, which these individuals do all day, every day. And it's all of a sudden like, oh my gosh, wow, you can teach me. Like, I need to learn from you. It just shifts the situation completely. So, we're doing things like that at tennis. But as I said, we're still on a journey. Like, we've got a long way to go as well. I'm really proud of where we've come, but we could be heaps better too. So,
Couple of things, like you mentioned the superhuman element to these people, some of the things they can do. It made me think back to Kurt Fernley and his marathon race at the Commonwealth Games in 2018, where he got the gold medal, and then he showed the reporter his watch afterwards that said he had an average heart rate of 195 beats per minute for the last, I think, hour and a half, 2 hours, however long the race took. And I was just like, I'd be lucky if I get up to that in, for a minute max. Like, I'm cooked after a minute of getting up to that level, let alone doing it straight and averaging that sort of intensity.
Yeah.
The other thing that you reminded me of when you talked about how Tennis Australia making it normal by running these activities, like have a go at wheelchair tennis, experience what it's like to work under these conditions. Ryan and I started on the same day at Cricket Australia, and so we did our induction together. And we met at the MCG nets. Like, we were standing side by side, and we thought, oh, this guy looks like a good person to be friends with. But we were in the MCG nets because Aaron Dragwich, who was the diversity inclusion manager, was taking us through blind cricket. We got introduced to blind cricket as at the very start of entering the organisation. We were given these masks that had varying levels of visibility, and someone would roll down this ball with a bell in it, and we'd have to try and hit it. And I reckon about 95% of people just missed it completely. And it was really, a great experience to actually understand how these people, play cricket under those circumstances. Another example, right at the back end of my time at Cricket Australia, just as COVID was about to hit, Courtney Hagan looks after, Indigenous, the Indigenous space at Cricket Australia, had organised this trip to go out to a camp in rural Victoria for a number of people. It was an overnight stay, and everyone was just going to get immersed in the Indigenous culture out there. And that was kind of, another great example of what an organisation can do to help people learn more about this space and understand what it's actually like.
Absolutely. Oh, they're great examples. And that's they're so, and like you still remember them clear as day. And there's something in that, because obviously for whatever was going on at that time or the way that experience was created, you think back to that experience. Can you ever remember some online program you did or some compliance module or some policy?
No.
Like, do you know what I mean? It's so silly that we
totally.
sort of, why aren't we doing
live it
more
out,
of this? Yeah,
you're
it
actually
really
remembering
lands. Yep, exactly.
Yeah, you're right. Like, here's a 10-question quiz. You are now,
Certified.
aware of diversity. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Here's a certificate to say you know about diversity and inclusion.
Exactly. In one ear, out the other.
Also, like, what I love about the Australian Open is how, like, Dylan Alcott's telecast, and it's not just him, but it's other matches of the wheelchair tennis. Like, that's amazing. There's not many other sports that actually broadcast it far and wide, and I think that's something that I really love about the summer of tennis, is that you get that insight. I can't name another sport. Rubes, help me out. I don't know if you know, but I think that stands out because people actually see it. Like, no one's seeing that if they don't kind of see it on TV, because we don't really hear about it as much. So if you can get it out on the broadcast to
It makes such a
millions of
difference.
people, all of a sudden it sort of flicks the switch. So I think that's something that's really important as well.
Yeah, and they've done an amazing job, particularly using the platform of the AO, both for obviously the incredible growth that the wheelies have now had. Really, Craig Tiley, our tournament director and CEO, but he was the first of all of the Grand Slams to showcase, to allow the wheelies to be part of the main draw, but then also to obviously put them on the main broadcast and RLA. And Dylan still talks about that time, and he reckons after the match, Craig reckons he nearly ripped his shoulder kind of in the hug, just so aggressively happy for it. But, it's sort of moments like that you probably at the time was maybe just a decision on the fly, a bit of a scheduling. Oh, what are we going to do? What do we put here? And the impact and symbolism and effect that just that decision had now on the community, on every person that watched it, it's unbelievable. So to not take for granted, but there's other things during the event that we run our Australian Tennis Championship, so that's an event for people with an intellectual disability, and we now have 2 streams for people with autism and also Down syndrome, and that's on Show Court 2. So like they're on major sort of courts in the event. We've also got our Glam Slam, so that's celebrating our LGBTI players, and I'm going to forget. We have now a Deaf and Hard of Hearing event. So there's lots of, and the irony is you go and watch these tennis players and they're unbelievable. Like, to think that they're categorized as some level of disability is just ridiculous, because they smash us all. I mean, they're elite athletes. They are unbelievable. Yeah.
I'll never forget. We're going back to Cricket Australia here, Anna. Sorry,
No,
but
good.
I'll never forget the day that because I was in community cricket and our department ran the inclusion chants for cricket. I remember going down there and I was just like, this is just crazy that there's people with, some blind, some hard of hearing, some people with disabilities, like all these kind of things. And I was looking at it and I was just like, there's absolutely no difference in what is happening on this cricket field compared to a game that I saw on the weekend. Like it honestly didn't matter. And it was actually insane.
Yeah.
I was thinking, geez.
It's so inspiring. I love it. Yeah, exactly. And you were talking before about getting on the sort of, this is normalizing it, is getting it on the public sort of eyeballs. What was so incredible, it wasn't this year's Olympic. I feel like it might have been the Com Games maybe 2 years ago. And it was particularly the swimming. And what they did was they were interrupting an able-bodied, they do an able-bodied event and then a para event, and it was all of it was broadcast, and it was, so anyone tuning in to see the I don't know, women's 100 meter relay then got to see this next race or the race before it, and it was such a smart way to get a captive audience more aware and educated on the abilities of these incredible athletes. I thought that was so smart and just such a, anyway, that was what sprung to mind when you were talking about.
If anyone wants to listen to what goes into making a Paralympic athlete, we did an interview with Matt Levy, who swam in Tokyo. It was part of a gold medal relay over there. We chatted to him just before he went over, just about how he trains and how he is an elite athlete, and some of the stuff they shared with us was incredibly inspiring. So if anyone wants to check that out, I believe he's in the early 100s, that episode. Usually I'm pretty good with my episode numbers, but I reckon he's around that point. I reckon 110 to 120 you can scroll back through. But Anna, you mentioned earlier one of the most impactful experiences for you and in this space was just immersing yourself and working alongside people with a disability. For people who would love to end up in a role like yours, what are some experiences or training, other than that of just ticking a box, that would be beneficial for those people who want a career in this space?
Or don't do anything that requires ticking a box would be my first suggestion. I mean, look, as I said at the start, I'm sort of an enthusiastic amateur. I'm so honoured to have kind of fallen into this opportunity, and it's taught me more than I knew coming into it. But I think get out and immerse. Exactly those experiences you talked about at cricket, where you went and did the stay in a First Nations community or whatever that situation, that immersive learning. The more you can just be comfortable with inclusion and diversity will help you to then advocate for it, because it's normal to you. Like it's normal for me in an exec meeting to be the one that says, well, hang on, what about this perspective? Or have we thought about doing it this way? Because it just is part of, how I suppose I think now. Whereas if it's seen as something over there to maybe learn or get a qualification in, or I don't know. I think if you're wanting to lead in this space, it has to be innately in your DNA to care, really, because it can be hard, like it can be still seen as that the battle you've kind of got to win, and the need to keep reminding, and the need to make sure that it isn't forgotten, or whatever the topic might be, that you've still got that front of mind. I'm not saying that that's not there. Of course it still is, but to be the person that's the vocal at a senior leadership level, I think you've just got to really connect with your customers, connect with the people you're representing, and do that respectfully. Yeah.
Awesome. We advocate for people heavily immersing themselves in grassroots sports so they can get a feel for the customers of sport. For people wanting to do a very similar thing in this space, what are some perhaps wheelchair tennis organisations, be that at any level, that people can approach to volunteer at?
Oh gosh, now you're putting me on the spot. What I would say is head to our website. Type in wheelies. No, we do have like a huge, quite a now large network of. So what we'll probably find is it'll be wheelchair tennis coaches who then coach at certain clubs around the country, and those clubs will be accessible clubs. But there are often now coaches that have trained in coaching wheelies and being able to, even right up to the high performance level. So I'd probably go online and suss out either the wheelies coach, and then of course just map it to your closest location. But in fact, the team have done an amazing job at slowly picking off every state around the country to create what they're calling these wheelies hubs. So it won't be every club that will be able to necessarily offer this expert coaching, but within a sort of kilometre radius, there'll be one. Nice. A few years back, I used to work in that area, and they just were kind of getting it off the ground then. And now where you see it's just grown so much. And, Dill, Heath, all of them, we've got to thank, I think, having those champions up there for people to aspire to be is drawn people to the sport more than, frankly, anything we would have done.
Fantastic. Well, Anna, we might leave it there, but it has been unreal speaking to you and just hearing about, first of all, your journey into this space, but also all the things that Tennis Australia are doing and sport in general are doing to make it more inclusive. It's been fantastic. So thanks so much for coming on, and good luck for the next few months. I'm sure you've got a bit of work to do by the time the AO comes around.
Oh, look, my absolute pleasure. I've loved chatting about all things inclusion, both at tennis, but, really in employment. It's the topic we should be talking about. So thank you both for featuring it. And might see you down at Melbourne Park in Jan.
Alrighty, Rubes, what an episode. That was amazing to hear from Anna, and just hearing about all the things that she did to get to where she is, but also all the activity that she is involved with to ensure that Tennis Australia is an inclusive organisation. Wow. What did you learn?
Oh, heaps, Ryan. Heaps, plenty. I think, two of the main takeaways for me, for one, if you're a person living with a disability and you want to work in sport, jot down a few of those questions and challenge the organisation you want to work at to make sure it is fit for you. And then secondly, if you want to work in that space and work with people with a disability, work with those people, then immerse yourself. Like Anna talked at length how they're trying to make it normal by introducing these initiatives into Tennis Australia so that, it's just a normal thing. And that was one of the key things for her to be able to do this role, was her own experience working with people who have a disability. So if this is a space you aspire to work in the future, go out and find the organizations that you can volunteer in to be around these people, to understand them better, to understand their needs, And that way you can then take that experience into an organization and say, hey, I'm actually really well educated in this. I've spent a lot of time around these sorts of people. I understand what they're looking for and I can serve them better. So get out there just as you would volunteer in a grassroots footy club, netball club, soccer club, whatever. Get out there and find the sports with a disability team that you can support.
Yeah, I love that. And, similar to what we said, and it's similar to your point, but go and, experience what it's like to play that sport. Um, we spoke about just before how we got to experience blind cricket, and just to see how hard that is for someone, you know, like us walking in there, but it just shows how amazingly talented they are to be able to play that. And just seeing that firsthand and actually experiencing it for yourself, it gives you that knowledge about what that sport is like and what it's actually like to be blind or have hard of hearing or whatever it might be. The more you can understand, the more it will just become second nature and normal for you. So it's really important. Awesome. What an episode. I love that. Anna's a legend.
Yep. 100%.
So yeah, amazing. Be sure to connect with us on LinkedIn. We'd love to chat with you on there. You can find a link to do so in our show notes. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.